Hey guys, welcome to another Sunday Conversation presented by FL1 News. I'm Josh Durso and I hope you are enjoying your weekend. This week we caught up with Victor Town Supervisor Jack Marren. He serves as chairman of the Ontario County Board of Supervisors. We talked about the community he calls home, the latest on the redevelopment of State Route 96 and what might actually happen with that design when everything starts to take shape, as well as his thoughts on the legalization of marijuana and early voting. It's a really interesting conversation. It's one you aren't going to want to miss. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's Sunday Conversation with Victor Supervisor Jack Marren. Chairman, thanks for being here. Obviously, I think it's been about a year or so since the last time you were here. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, obviously, another term as chairman of the Ontario County Board of Supervisors. Let's start there. How do you stay fresh after serving multiple terms as chairman?
Well, my colleagues certainly keep me pushing, but I have to say the talented leadership in Ontario County, starting with our county administrator, deputy county administrator, and all of our great department heads. New ideas and initiatives on an annual basis, and that's certainly what keeps us pushing. And I learn daily from certainly the leads that they take.
Now, we sort of see some in storylines playing out in other communities around the area, around the Finger Lakes, learning that valuable lesson, just how important the people are, the
Yes.
individuals who make up that county structure, the folks who make up those day-to-day employees. You guys obviously have learned that lesson. You're living proof that, retaining employees is really important. Where does that land in the rank of, just the things that you guys have to think about on a regular basis, just so to keep yourselves honest and also to keep those folks employed?
Well, I think first and foremost, establishing a mission statement, core values, and following that. We certainly did that a couple of years ago. And I think first and foremost, everyone from the elected officials down to our department heads and all of our employees understanding actually who we serve and who we work for, the residents of Ontario County. And I think if you follow that and truly understand and abide by that, I think that really helps immensely. And for us, succession planning has been pivotal in our success. Certainly we've had opportunities where we've take a look at the talent inside of our county facilities, and there's times we've had to go outside, but many times we're able actually to nurture someone and bring them up to the ranks. I think one of our greatest success stories is our Director of Finance, who actually started with, Mary Gates, started with Ontario County as a Finance Clerk 1, and today she's a Director of Finance for Ontario County.
So then, as far as the chairmanship is concerned, what does the growth look like for you in terms of how you successively plan year after year, set goals, that sort of thing? Are there any things that sort of change, or any things that you've learned over the last, say, 2, 3, 4 years that maybe you didn't know in that year 1, year 2 phase?
There's no question. I've learned an awful lot about agriculture. I mean, let's face it, as supervisor for the town of Victor, the farming community within the town is diminishing all the time. The next generation doesn't want to farm, and certainly I think that we find that prevalent throughout this region. But I think first and foremost, I think that's what I've learned an awful lot about, how important agriculture is to Ontario County, and how can we certainly, moving forward, utilize agriculture and tourism as the next part of potential revenue generator.
How do you account for that sort of when a big economic driver like agriculture sort of starts to dissipate or starts to move to a different part of the county or even out of the county? What kind of moving and shaking has to happen in the moment to sort of make sure that all things are still being accounted for, that those folks are still being represented at the county level?
Well, I think I have to cite our relationship with the Cornell Cooperative Extension as pivotal. Supervisor Fred Lightfoot from the town of Gorham, who is on the Cornell Cooperative Extension Board, and certainly him and his family, farming community in Gorham, certainly he keeps us abreast. He also chairs our Planning and Environmental Quality Committee as well. He's chairman of our Public Works, but he's also a member of that Planning and Environmental Quality, and certainly he passes that information along. Collaboration, I think one initiative we had in 2018 that I know it was an eye-opener for many of the supervisors. I think we had 15 out of the 21 that were able to attend, was a tour of a number of our farming operations in Ontario County. And again, for Victor Supervisor Jack Marren, it was an eye-opener, especially some of the milking operations. I was blown away.
So to that end, what are some of the big sort of title changes that have taken place in Ontario County on the economic side, just so folks can sort of get a picture for what Ontario County looks like now versus what it looked like maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, I think collaboration with the IDA of our county, working with our county government, and certainly we have a number of boards. There's makeup. We have individuals from the private sector. But we also have 3 town supervisors that are sit on that committee as well. And before the approvals are made, they have to go through the pipeline and certainly get the consent of the IDA board, and then many times coming to the full board of supervisors as well. So I think certainly transparency, governmental approvals, and this isn't 3 or 4 men in the back room making a decision. This is a transparent system that we follow, and certainly it's not all, and again, it's not the norm. There's other counties that have a different approach. This has been our approach. We follow a strategic plan, and to us, we feel it's been successful.
Now, in terms of balancing for any board of supervisors, you have to represent. You're representing a town, and you're also representing the county and the county's interests as a whole. How do you see that balance sort of playing out in Ontario County? Obviously, some other counties have struggled with that balance or the perception of that balance. Do you think Ontario County does a pretty good job of being able to balance the town issues and the county issues and all folks being accounted for along the way?
Well, absolutely, and I'm not going to say that they are one and the same, but many of the issues within our own town also, if you look at our senior population, certainly that's part of it as well, and we have that both at the town level and at the county level. Traffic, pollution, opioids. So a number of them are certainly, they run parallel with town, cities, villages, and then in the county. I think for us, and again, I'm going to say kudos to our state government with the shared services. That really got us to get together again. We have been doing, we've all been sharing services for many years, but to really bring it to the forefront and include school districts, we've included fire districts as well in that. I think that's very important. It's been helpful. We are going to continue to do that. We're setting dates in April and I think June of this year to get together again because we continue to see a role that our county government can play a larger role in supporting our smaller municipalities here in Ontario County.
So you mentioned the Shared Services Initiative.
Yes.
Obviously, that is, it's been, some folks have been skeptical about it, how well it's actually worked, because as you mentioned, a lot of sharing of services, it's been going on for a long, long time.
Yes.
How much of the implementation of that was a challenge for Ontario County, or was it pretty easy to get the folks together, get everybody in the room, and start working on ways that you guys could further collaborate or further share services?
I can tell you, my recollection is first and foremost, we had some very good attendance. I was very happy with that. We had, I think, 4 school districts as well, which is certainly not the norm. Usually, unfortunately, people tend to have the boundaries. I'm school, how can they help us, and things like that. So I thought our county administrator, Mary Krause, did a wonderful job getting everyone together. And then we allowed, actually, for the first 20 minutes, a venting period, because essentially, we went round table, everyone around the room, and it was, many of the comments were very similar, but people just had to get that off the chest. We've been doing this all along, banging their fists on the table and stuff like that. 20 minutes go by, and okay, let's get to work. Let's roll up our sleeves, and how can we help one another? And I know for the town of Victor, we actually contracted with Ontario County's planning department. And what I was able to do was lower the head count at the town of Victor, and also reduce my costs because it was cheaper to pay Ontario County to provide services in the town of Victor than it was to have a consultant provide those same services. So the hourly rate was like in half. So a big benefit to the town of Victor. So that's, that was a big initiative. I know City of Canandaigua, Town of Canandaigua, they looked at consolidation of judge courts, utilizing the same facility, little things like that. So I think, if anything, yes, we've been doing it, but more like, one superintendent picking up the phone, calling another superintendent, but this is a collaboration of all elected officials in the room, villages, mayors, and whatnot. So
now, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any mention of the Shared Services Initiative as being part of the upcoming budget that the lawmakers and governor are currently working on. I'm assuming Ontario County would continue to be receptive to working toward this same mission of collaborating and building on the Shared Services Initiative as possible?
Yes, absolutely. I was at the New York State Association of Counties conference last week, and some dialogue there with some of my colleagues. And then last Thursday we had a Board of Supervisors meeting, and County Administrator did mention that we would continue with this as well.
So let's talk about some of the broader stuff that as you look forward, we're going to talk a little bit about Victor specifically later, but some of the bigger, broader goals that you're looking at for 2019 for the rest of the year, leading the Board of Supervisors. What are some of the priorities as you guys move forward?
We are currently in the process of, we just have opened bids and awarded bids 74 Ontario. Those familiar with Canandaigua, that was our old jail for many years. That has been we're going to say an underutilized building, but certainly a building that needed significant upgrade. So currently it houses our IT department and 911 center. Board of Election has been moved out to a temporary location. We'll bring the Board of Elections back to that facility. Board of Supervisors has been out of our city seat in Canandaigua. We've been out in Hopewell for the last 5 years now. We want to move back into that facility, and then the ever-growing family courts has taken this former space where our grand jury was held up in the third room of our courtroom. So we want to share, the Board of Supervisors would share a room with the grand jury as well. So those were a few. What we did do out of this, again, consolidation, we took, it was our Meals on Wheels program, Office of the Aging. They used to make the meals at 74 Ontario. We have now consolidated with our jail, and we're utilizing one. So we have one kitchen, and it's our jail kitchen. Again, separation of duties there, but we're turning out about 350 meals a day for, about 170 of our inmates that we have detained on a daily basis, but then for our senior population. We're putting out right now annually about 75,000 meals for our Meals on Wheels program throughout Ontario County.
So any, obviously that's a lot of good stuff, but any carryover items from 2018 that you guys are still working on, or that you are going to be able to get finished up? And then the carryover to that question is, how do you ensure that the follow-through is always met, and that the constituents are always seeing the completion of various projects that you guys set out on?
Well, I think one thing is, we all, members of the Board of Supervisors, we know that by year 2028, I think that's our timeline to close our landfill. So it's important to create and identify areas that we can increase revenue at some point to offset that loss. But in the meantime, certainly we continue to have challenges with our landfill from an odor standpoint. Certainly our residents in the Seneca, town of Senecas, and Seneca Castle, as well as certainly the town and city of Geneva as well. So what we did, we created a new position in December, and it's a Director of Sustainability and Solid Waste, and it's a young lady, Carla Jordan. Carla was a former employee of Casella a number of years ago. Very talented young lady, and certainly she's been doing well in a short time, within a month, working with Casella, and certainly the outreach and better communications. That's, if anything, we look at an area that we have lacked and an area that we need to improve in is communication to the residents. We have a phone system that when they call in, we detect an odor, but it's the follow-through. So there's going to be more scientist type of data collected, and Casella has just contracted with a company that's actually over and doing the same type of work over in Perrington, Macedon area, with the High Acres landfill as well. So they've had good results over there, and we anticipate the same scenario here.
So how much of the municipal side of the planning is also sort of the working toward the idea of reducing total waste, or reducing the amount of waste that's being produced? Obviously, not all of it's coming from Ontario County that's going to the Ontario County landfill, but
Yes.
Obviously that, I would imagine, is part of the discussion and part of that position that you were describing as well, right?
Yeah, great question, Josh. So what we did was part of our shared service, and part of some of the money that we received from the landfill was to put a pot of money aside that each municipality could be able to go for if they could come up with some categories. So in the town of Victor, we came up with a number of new recycling methods within our town. So we were able to acquire some new equipment for our recycling center. I think the town of Manchester received some funding for the recycling. Composting is another initiative. Electronic waste days. So this year, unfortunately, in the town of Victor, we don't have the queuing space near our recycling center. So Farmington is going to be the host community. The town of Victor will pay for it, but we will be opening that up to certainly Farmington and Victor residents as well as other county residents. I know last year they actually they reached a point where I think they maybe had identified you could pre-sign up for 400 individuals. So it was the town of Bristol that hosted for the towns of East and West Bloomfield, and they had over 400, to the point where many residents within those three communities never got an opportunity. I think the last time Farmington held an e-waste day, they had 20 pallets of material that was collected in a 3-hour window. So those are some of the new initiatives. Paints, there's different types of days for those. Paints, other type of things that you don't want to be pouring down your drain or throwing in your regular trash. So it's interesting when you go. I know the first time I attended one of those, and you see the people with the white suits on and everything like that. So what kind of contaminants are they collecting here? But they have to protect themselves. But these are some of the initiatives.
So you mentioned, obviously, the loss of revenue for the county. What does that look like? What is the sort of like annual breakdown of roughly what that number
I would say in the ballpark probably about $2 million a year, which is usually earmarked for capital improvement projects. And certainly more and more counties are doing more within their own counties for bridges and roads, and not always relying on state and federal assistance. So, $2 million would be, and I may be off on that, but I think that's a starting point that we'll be looking for. And again, I mentioned earlier, maybe agriculture and tourism combined, some type of method, more and more of our breweries. So we'll see.
So you just mentioned a great segue right there, by the way. A few of the things that are really sort of popping in Ontario County is sort of the development, especially that Farmington to Victor stretch.
Yes.
A lot of changes coming up, obviously. How do you, before we get into that, I'm curious, what's your take on sort of managing the East-West Divide that's sort of started to bubble or percolate? Obviously, some folks in Geneva don't feel quite as represented as some of the folks on the westernmost portion of the county. We see it everywhere. We see it in Wayne County, Seneca County with the North-South Divide. Is that just a natural part of how the economic development is actually happening in these counties, or is it just, given how much rural area is between the more urban centers, or the places that people think are urban centers? Josh,
unfortunately, I that's a great question, because I certainly get a sense of frustration that there's areas within our county. To your point, Canandaigua, Farmington, and Victor, they account for about 85% of the building permits issued in Ontario County. Mm-hmm. So if the rest of the county are like, okay, so we only make up, whether it's housing development or certainly commercial as well, they're struggling in many, very little growth. So that's why it's important collectively as a county, look in those three townships, they continue to grow, but the rest of the county will benefit as well. I can tell you, Josh, Eastview Mall, certainly we have a dark Sears store today. The mall that people in this region have known for 40 years is not the same mall we're going to see 5-10 years from now.
Right.
So it's important that this Victortown board gets in front of this and works with, works with the mall, works with our planning department and planning board, and really take a look at what that looks like in the future, and how can we, make that continue to be a great revenue source for this county.
Now, some of the folks who are listening are probably saying, well, Josh, you have folks from Geneva on the show all the time. There's so much happening in the city of Geneva. When we talk about this sort of issue, it's more of a rural versus developed issue, rather than it being a true east-west or north-south kind of divide, right?
It is, and that's unfortunate, but I can tell you, so case in point, and hello, City of Geneva and Town of Geneva residents. 2 weeks ago, I was asked to speak to your newly formed, I think within the last 2 year, Kiwanis Group, Geneva, and certainly they're looking for new members. So please get involved, because I think you can support the city and town of Geneva as well as the school district there. I had a great opportunity there to speak to them. We talked about the new initiative with Real Eats there. There's a company that's growing, bringing jobs to Geneva. I'm very excited for Gage Sterling, the new city manager in Geneva. I think she's a great individual to lead the city through that downtown revitalization, that $10 million that was awarded. In addition, I know the city recently received some more state funding as well. So there are some great things going on in Geneva, the visitors section, right there on Route 5 and 20 as well. A lot of good things. And take advantage of what we have man-made. We have a beautiful lake along there. So that's an asset that we can continue to use. The other asset I look at, is the 4 thruway exits off the New York State Thruway, and we have to maximize them as well from east to west.
Now, one of the things when we have folks from Yates County up, they're always talking about broadband expansion, especially in those rural places. When you look to the southern end, some of those communities that you were mentioning, the southern end of Ontario County, is that one of the things that you hear folks say, we need better access to high-speed internet?
Absolutely. We have heard that, because more and more individuals, and I know I've heard that from people in Bristol and South Bristol, stay at home or they're retired. Many of them still working, but working from the house, and they lack that. There has been an initiative, Access Ontario. We did sell that as well. So that company, and there's a few other companies, actually they started in the Naples area, and they're actually working up. But I know they are in the Victor Farmington area as well. There are websites that you can access to see, put in your zip code, put in your address, right, and you can find out how close they are. Because I have residents in the town of Victor. Here's a community that you like to think we have everything in there. Right. Well, we still have areas of pockets that we won't have it today. We probably won't have it for another 2 years.
Is that, and that's this isn't to say that it's specifically Ontario County's fault, but is that really just a glaring failure in terms of not the state and all the agencies involved not being able to sort of navigate this digital age that we're now in, and make sure that all the folks in a community like Victor, yes, of all places, aren't up to speed yet in terms of the things that are necessary now for economic development even?
Yes, I think the frustration from elected officials around our state, many of whom I had an opportunity to speak to last week, frustration that it's been overstated how advanced we are, when in fact there's many pockets within our state that we're still years out. So that's the frustration, that's been overstated how successful it's been. Yes, it's improved, yeah, but we're not where we really need to drive that economic opportunity.
Disparity. Now, to that end, I believe the last time you were here, you said something to the effect of Farmington would be the largest, yes, by population. I can't remember what I wrote down 10 years because I couldn't quite remember what the time frame was that you threw on it. Still stand by that? I do, absolutely. So about 2 weeks ago at our last board, well, we had a special board last meeting, but 2 weeks ago at our regularly scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting, I stated that again because I had said that at a department head meeting. Farmington, within the next, I would say 5 years, 5 to 7 years, will have a larger population than the town of Victor. Of course, the new Canandaigua Town Supervisor, they're seeing a substantial amount of growth as well. So we might have competition between the two towns, but there's no question. I think at the end of the day, when you look at the acreage within the town of Farmington that is buildable,
And certainly a large area that they really seem to focus on, they being the developers, is within the Victor Central School District, that footprint. So, the town of Victor, we may okay a 25 home development. In Farmington, they're okaying 125 home development. So they're growing, and I'm hearing from Farmington residents, because a lot of it is there. It has a potential traffic impact on the village of Victor and the town of Victor because of Victor Central Schools and the busing. So I know the state, I'm looking forward. The state's got a project in year 2020. They're actually building a roundabout just outside the village, entering into the town, right on the village line there on Route 96 itself. So stay tuned.
So let's talk about that. Obviously, change is coming. A lot of folks sort of zero in on, obviously, 332 as far as development goes,
Yes.
because that's what's really grown over the last 10, 15 years. But Route 96, State Route 96, undergoing some pretty serious changes too.
Yes.
What does that look like? Obviously, we talked a little bit about it the last time you were on. Projects like that take time. Where do we stand right now compared to where we stood year and a half ago?
So about a year and a half ago, we were going through the process of a Route 96 corridor study. We have now adopted that Route 96 corridor study. We came up with 6 initiatives that, there's no silver bullet for, to eliminate the traffic, but these are some that can help mitigate it. And I think one area that can really help us is between Route 251 and School Street. There's a Finger Lakes Railroad has a spur there, an old line that they don't utilize. So we have been having some very positive conversations with Finger Lakes Railroad about the railroad abandoning that spur, and it's a whole process that would have to take place. They are interested, it's their equipment, so that they would get that equipment, but at some point, I'm hoping that a combination of village, county, and town forces can do a lot of the legwork as far as building that road. Timeline for that, unknown, because I don't know how long it really takes. It's more than just Finger Lakes Railroad sending a letter to Washington, D.C. saying we want to abandon this rail line or this portion of it. So there's a process where they have to take through Washington, D.C. That is my understanding. Route 96 itself, between Fishers area, say by Chili's, and heading up to Route 251, an opportunity there. Again, there was the conversation about Bass Pro Shop. That I could tell you is a bit. There's some conversations about that. Jack Marren's making no promises whatsoever that a Bass Pro Shop is coming, but I do know that the DeMarco Group that owns that land is very interested in still developing something. So certainly we're looking to widen that as far as making additional lanes, turning lanes, eventually into that project as well.
Is the current state of State Route 96, especially as you're going through the village of Victor and heading into the town, is that the greatest window into the changes that have taken place in Ontario County over the last 30, 40 years?
Oh, yes, I can tell you, being married to my wife now for 41 years and then dating her for a few years before that I remember traffic would be backed up, and then what was the reason? Well, it was people going to Canandaigua Lake. People were going to the racetrack. Well, things haven't changed a lot. It's just that there's more congestion on a more regular basis. We see it at lunchtime. Sometimes we certainly see it in the morning when there's school in session. That's an attraction as well. I mean, we have parents that drive their children to school, students driving themselves. Buses, more and more buses again coming from the east as the Farmington continues to grow. We're hoping that roundabout will allow the school buses to go through that roundabout, and then they go up Lina Road. And then we're hoping between the town and county we can build another roundabout, because currently today, and I certainly support them because I understand the safety first and foremost of our students is very important, is that the Director of Transportation for Victor Central Schools will not send buses down the back end of the school. So it adds, because they've had some accidents and near misses at the bottom of that hill as well. So our intent being a couple roundabouts to allow school buses to go down the back side and head to Farmington, rather than right now they go down High Street into the village and really add to the congestion. Again, not blaming the school, because clearly when you see the growth within the Victor Central School District footprint, that is certainly one of the reasons why people are moving to these two communities.
Well, it sort of seems, from my perspective, it seems like the Victor campus is a little unique in that it's in a it's in a pretty highly trafficked area, or it's very close to a highly trafficked area, whereas a lot of other schools and school districts have facilities that are a little bit further away from the main drag, so to speak.
Yes.
Is that, when you look forward, so 10 years from now, what does that sort of look like? Are we at a point where hopefully things are more complete and there might be a roundabout or two or a bypass or some kind of some sort of finished product to ease this issue that obviously has been going on for a long time?
So again, 6 identified initiatives with no silver bullet, but certainly I think the roundabouts will reduce some of the congestion created by the school in session. That railroad corridor, we're hoping to capture the traffic that's coming from the south of us, the communities east and west, Bloomfield, Bristol, South Bristol, because their destination for 95% of them is the entranceway to Route 490. Because let's face it, anyone outside of Victor, how do you get to 490? You either hop on the thruway up in 332 in Farmington, or you find some other road, collector road, to get through the town of Victor and get on 490 up by the Eastview Mall. Right. So those are a couple of areas that certainly, I don't think, again, there's no silver bullet. We're not going to be able to reduce it 100%. You know, I know some folks are, and I always use the point, and I have a number of residents who have lived in major metropolitan cities that say, Jack, this is not traffic.
Right.
It's a minor inconvenience. So,
right.
You know, I guess it's the way you look at it and stuff like that.
So obviously, we're mid-state budget process right now. I want to get your take on a few proposals that have popped up. First and foremost, obviously, which is now happening. It's done. It's been signed into law. Early voting changes, a complete flip of the timeline.
Yes.
Folks, in just a matter of a couple weeks, Republicans will be heading out and attempting to gather signatures. Talk to us about that change, how Ontario County's handling it, and what your sort of personal views are on how quickly this was thrown at counties and at voters, for that matter.
Well, I think certainly early voting is there's an added expense, because I think it's 8 days. We have 8 to 10 days. I think we have to be open for 8-hour shifts, a couple sites. So I would believe in our county we'd probably identify a site in both our cities, Canandaigua and Geneva, as early voting sites. Again, the cost of manning them, early registration. I do like that concept, allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to early register, and then when they turn 18, here they are, they're ready to vote. I think anything we can do to get more individuals to vote, I think that's very important. I did hear from a number of our colleagues from both sides of the aisle that said, boy, I have no problem with this. Can we put it off a following?
1 year.
Warn us this year.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do, but it takes effect in year 2020. So that's a bit of the hardship, but you know what? We'll make it work. I do believe, though, certainly combining the primary days does make sense at the end of the day. And again, if we could have just put it off for another year, but it does make sense. Why have 2 different primary days? So I think that's a good thing. So it is right now. It's kind of all hands on deck as far as Board of Elections around this region. Everyone's scrambling. What do we have to do? Getting information out there and really educating a lot of people, because that is a short time window. That's petitions will be, I think, distributed towards the end of February, and then collected, I think, by April 1st, around that timeline. So we're scrambling.
So obviously, one of the changes that we've heard a lot of concern about AIM funding. The aid for small municipalities, it's going bye-bye, or if the governor has his way, it'll go bye-bye. What have you heard thus far? Obviously not a direct impact on Ontario County or the town of Victor, but obviously the villages, I'm sure, are very, very concerned. Yeah. Not a big deal. A big deal, any amount of money when you're talking about a budget is a big deal, right?
Yeah, no question. So Ontario County, City of Canandaigua, City of Geneva, not affected. Town of Manchester, not affected. all of our villages, 6 villages, I think it is, all affected, and the rest of our towns as well. So I can use the Village of Victor, $14,000, Town of Victor, $22,000. For the Town of Victor, that's 1 penny on the tax rate, if you look at it that way.
Right.
So for every 1 penny, it's $20,000. So that's it for us. For the village, it's probably close to 2 cents for them, I would imagine. So that was disappointing. I was disappointed myself because last week I had the good fortune of serving on the NISAC board as well, and I am the only town supervisor who's actually on this board. Many of them are county administrators or county executives, and I did not get the support to. NISAC had proposed a resolution supporting all of our villages and towns, and I think it was a matter of too many egos in the room, but and not having the spirit of cooperation with their own town supervisors that they were reluctant to support it. NISAC did agree when they testified on behalf of all of our counties for the budgets. They would testify in support of putting or maintaining this revenue source for all of the villages and towns within our state.
It's interesting, listening to some of the reaction to this. It seems more to me more concerned about the chipping away than it is the actual amount of money. Because like you said, it is a relatively small amount of money, but rather this is just another thing being peeled back by Albany. Is that sort of where the frustration lies?
Absolutely. I heard that all day long, that this is the bigger goal. And I know some people won't appreciate some of those comments, but I think for the Town of Victor, $22,000. Yes, don't want to lose anything, but it's not a major impact. There's no question about that. So we'll find that, but it's just a little bit here and there. We went through, the governor first was elected, we went through this whole mandate relief thing. We had a cap on Medicaid, instituted the Tier 5 and 6 of the pension. End of day. We still continue to get these mandates. Again, here's the change in election law. I think it's all good. It'd be good, even better in the year 2020. Right. AIM, same thing. Okay, we're taking it away in 2020. Instead of all of our towns and counties have gone through their budget process. Villages are in their budget processes right now. They'll be adopting their budgets in the months to come, but they know first, so at least they had the forewarning for next year's budget. So that's what I think for many of us, it's a chipping away. And, I know the governor has called for many, many years. There's too many governments, too many districts. We need to consolidate. He's even put forth funding for that, but there's been very little villages that have consolidated, or school districts as well. So I think my own opinion again, is that just chipping away and hoping that it just puts, municipalities out there that are going to be in financial trouble down the road and have no choice but to consolidate and merge with other, whether it's school districts or villages and towns.
So it's interesting because I think back to when the Shared Services Initiative was first put forward, or when it was first talked about and then executed. The complaint then was that there wasn't a lot of time to turn around, for counties to get their stuff together, to get these boards together, and to make it happen. Ontario County, successful. You guys managed it, got it done. Seneca County struggled with it. Cayuga County also sort of struggled in that same way. Not really enough time to do the things that maybe they would have done if they had like a year to think about it. Why does that seem to be the trend, where we see an idea proposed in January or February and we're talking about implementation in April of the same year instead of January 1 the following year, when folks maybe have elected representatives have a little more time to digest everything, figure out a game plan, and to sort of move forward?
Well, that's the frustration, is who actually are they listening to? And again, I know certainly in my own relationship with both the senators that are part of Ontario County and our assemblymen. I get great relationships with them. They're periodically reaching out to us, or they'll take my phone calls as well. This is what we need, this type of support. But does it end there? Is this all driven by New York City? And we have that boundaries, and there is the Great Divide of New York, unfortunately. So that is very frustrating. So
we've got a few extra minutes here. I want to ask you, marijuana legalization. looks like it's coming. Looks like Albany is full steam ahead in terms of making it happen. Your reaction to the prospect of marijuana being legalized and what that could mean, including, I'm curious what your take is on the caveat to the rule where towns or counties apparently may be able to opt out of the legalized sale. Taking all that into account, how are you reacting to or feeling about it?
So let me, because a lot of dialogue. New York State Association of Counties, they videotaped the presentation. So we had presenters last week. We had an attorney from state of Massachusetts, could talk about state of Massachusetts. We had a woman who had some illnesses over time, and she needed the medical marijuana to continue to be healthy. Actually, so she could function, get out of bed. She has started a medical dispensary in San Francisco and one in Portland, Oregon as well. And then we had a cannabis grower from our state speak as well. So some great feedback from them. They presented on what their knowledge of this whole process, and then the Q&A. Q&A got there was some passion in there as well, because we grow up teaching our kids, don't drink and drive, don't smoke this, and now all of a sudden, so individuals spoke with passion. They received some nice round of applauses. So there's a lot of people that certainly are against it. Myself, I can tell you right now, I went into these presentations thinking, okay, my viewpoint of marijuana was going to be Cheech and Chong, okay? I heard it was nothing but Cheech and Chong. It was how the hemp industry could be a great addition to any county. Agriculture. We have, again, we talked about it earlier, farmland is not being cultivated today. Could this be cultivated in a whole different method? So I think before Ontario County, again, we're trying to wrap our arms around it, the senior leadership, take it to our Board of Supervisors, present to them. Before we can talk about opting in, opting out, we have to understand what the full impact could be. I mean, again, we're looking to backfill from the revenue source at some point here in the next 10 years. Maybe this is an area we need to pursue. And again, all under the guidelines of the law as well. So, and again, the hemp industry and the medical component of it as well, I think there's ancillary businesses that could grow out of this as well. That could be, right now, again, we can't even identify how big that could potentially be, all in a good way. Again, we know that certainly our Sheriff's Department is not supportive of this. My understanding, I think the teachers' unions, schools' unions have come out against this as well. So let's see what's actually written today. Again, a lot of uncertainty as to what was actually originally proposed and what will probably be in the final bill, because I truly believe it will be passed. I think, again, New York City, Mayor de Blasio, Commissioner of Public Safety, they want this, so I think it's the push is coming and it's going to take place.
Now the sort of economic impact that you mentioned, do you think that's sort of where Governor Cuomo might have gotten this whole thing right, where he basically said, and it received a lot of criticism at the time, but he essentially said, if we don't do it, these folks who want to do this are just going to go elsewhere, and the money is going to leave New York State, or the possible revenue on the economic development side. Is that sort of one of the realities that folks just have to consider when looking at this debate?
If it's not number one, I'd be shocked. I think economics is number one. And I think we've already seen that when you look at all the casinos. We've gone through a process for casinos. And why was that driven? It was driven because Atlantic City, the state of Connecticut, so states that border us have gone through this. So now we have marijuana legalized in the state of Massachusetts, state of Vermont, and there's certainly conversation. We can also look at betting, sports betting as well. Other states. So I think these are a couple initiatives that are just solely being driven by economics, and you can look no further than our whole casino process that we went through a number of years ago.
So I like to end on a positive note. So the New York Beer Project.
Yes.
That is, from what I've seen, it seems like the definitive big win in the last 6 months. Last month, they 180 jobs, full and part time.
Correct.
walk us through that, just how much is seeing that land, it's happening, it's real, no proposals or promises.
Well, first and foremost, it is a gorgeous building. And I know folks will say, wow, it's big. It is big, but it's a big, beautiful building. And I can't wait. When I had an opportunity to tour it inside, they were just putting hanging drywall. Right. And now I really much look forward to seeing it next Tuesday night. There's a soft opening on the 11th that I'm inviting to, but they're actually opening, on the 12th. And actually on Valentine's Day, they are having their grand opening. So beautiful. I'm looking forward to seeing the inside. The outside is simply gorgeous. And so we had a great developer. And I have met more Buffalo natives who live in this region who have experienced the Lockport facility that they have. And so my only concern the first few is, where's everyone going to park? So hopefully the ownership has figured that out, and I know there's some additional parking nearby. They eventually will be knocking down the old Pizza Uno building, and that'll become additional parking as well. So, but this is great for this region. This is, again, when you look at somebody that's putting a town or a community on the map, and then the reason to travel there. So, again, whether or not they're going to have a flight of beer there and a burger there, they're going to go across the street to the mall shopping. So this is, it'll touch on a number of those ancillary businesses. You've got to fuel their car up before they go home. So all good.
Hey, appreciate the time as always, John.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.
Hey, special thanks again to Chairman Marren for taking the time to sit down with us this week. A big thank you to FingerLakes1.com for making this podcast possible, and my thanks to those of you listening at home or on the road. We'll be back next week with Stephen Parker Zielinski, South Seneca Central School Superintendent. Have a great week, guys. I will see you next time.